So, Christian, how are you doing with the magazine?
Let me just see if I can share something over to you. So I have been a little fanciful, as I tend to get, and you should now be able to see what this front cover looks like. This magazine is complete, pending one item that Nori managed to nudge me and say, Christian, can you get this in here? That shall be going out to the paying public of our ASSAP community anytime within the next couple of weeks. I do say that because I'm waiting on a letter from our president, Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe, who wishes to add something to this particular issue. I'm awaiting now. So when I get that, that will then be added to this magazine. And I've been speaking to the printers all week. I've had a really good relationship with them. They are ready and willing to print and send to everyone's house when we say so. So as soon as I receive that letter from Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe, this will be added to the Seriously Strange magazine for this particular issue. And this issue is not just a bumper edition, it has become a super bumper edition due to some additions that were suggested by our archivist and librarian, Bill. He's like, hey, maybe we could do this as well. And I can see there's like Rob Gandy here in the audience. He'll be very happy to see that he's got two of his articles in here featured in this particular issue, along with many, many more. All the articles and the features that were included in issue 161 have also been included in this now. So making it go from a bumper edition of 64 pages now to 88 of a super bumper edition with further additions. So this will be going out as soon as I receive that article and that letter from the chief, as it were. And that's really good news going forward. And it also comes with anomaly being sent to everyone's house and printed at the same time.
So, yes, we also have the Benteen Award, the Michael Benteen Award, which is currently asking for nominations. So if you have anybody that is outstanding within the field of the paranormal and they have contributed either maybe something like research purposes, or they've written an article or a paper, anything that you think is worthy of a contribution into the paranormal community, please can you send details of them and why you think that they are fitting to receive the Benteen Award. So you can send that to secretary@assap.ac.uk, and we will take all of your nominations and deal with those. If you need any information on what it is about, please have a look at the current newsletter, and that will show you the information that's required. Also, Christian will be taking more magazine articles for the next issue. So I think that's 163. For the next person that's coming in, or if Christian's going to stay after the AGM, then we'll be looking for more articles or paranormal information, letters, stories, research papers for Anomaly and for the Seriously Strange. They can go forward to publications at assap.ac.uk. So that's all the housekeeping that we have this evening. It's lovely to see so many of you here this evening. So without further ado. Welcome Andy McGrath to our ASSAP. I think it's the first time Andy's been with us. Andy is known as the Sherlock Holmes of the paranormal. He's a paranormal researcher and folklorist, and he has over 25 years' experience in the field. He's a speaker, an investigator, a podcaster, and an author. He has been dealing with Beasts of Britain and hairy humanoids, and also he deals with a Monsters Kid Guide series. I think you probably saw me post that within the ASSAP page the other day, for anybody who's missed that. He's also a host of a new TV series, which we are on our second series now, Weird Britain. And that is being shown on Catch Up and also currently on Sky, History and Blaze. So he seeks to celebrate the wonderful histories, mysteries, folklore and fables of the British Isles. So tonight, Andy, over to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Caroline. Just to clarify, by the way, there's Sherlock Holmes of the paranormal thing. Now, an agent I had before, he made me write that. I said, what shall I write? How should I describe myself? And he said, say that you've been called the Sherlock Holmes of paranormal. And I said, well, nobody's called me that. He said, yes, they have. I just did it just then. So that's as far as it goes, as far as I know. And it does seem a little bit, to me, a little bit intrusive as a Holmes fan. I love Sherlock Holmes, to even place that moniker upon myself. But I'm going to wear it with pride and hopefully try to live up to that reputation at some point in the future. Now, talking about the series Weird Britain, it does celebrate the weird, wild and wonderful histories, mysteries, folklore, fables of the British Isles. And it has a very particular slant, and something that we wanted, myself, the director and creator, Matt Everett, wanted, was to show Britain in its wonder and its brilliance, and not any of this kind of Louis Theroux-esque, side-eye, look at these weirdos kind of filmmaking, which you get all the time. It seems to be a very British phenomenon, doesn't it? And we've managed to see loads of wonderful places all around the UK. And we're, as I say, second series is coming out in May, and we're about to start filming the third series even in April. And we're having a great time. So I just thought I'd go over a few of the different cases for your audience, maybe tell them one or two things about it. I'm not an expert. I'm just the person that went and interviewed experts about these different things, and see how we get on. So looking at the first element, one of my favorite ones as well, as a Londoner, was the Time Machine tomb. And that's Hannah Courtoy's Egyptian time travel tomb, or her mausoleum in Old Brompton Cemetery. And it's nestled right in the middle of Brompton Cemetery in West London. And it's quite mysterious. It's got a very Egyptian appearance to it. It almost looks like a mini pyramid in a way, with a pyramidal roof and more of a, it's been described almost as a portal-like mausoleum. And this was created in the 19th century. Now, Hannah Courtoy, she was obsessed with Egyptology, and she met this man called Joseph Bonamy, who is an Egyptologist, and his headstone's also in the graveyard, featuring a picture of Anubis, as well as many other Egyptian symbols from that time. And there's an urban myth attached to this, which basically says that she was trying to cheat time, that she actually had Joseph Bonamy design this teleportation device and place it in the middle of the cemetery. And when you go there, actually, you find out that it can't be unlocked. It's been there since 1854. It's 20 feet tall. It's made with polished granite. It's got a bronze door, and it's inscribed with the initials HC. Now, Hannah Courtoy did hieroglyphs all around the steps and the walls, and at the very top, just before the pyramid, on each side, on all four sides, there's this sun-like, almost like ships, rounded glass with little sun rays all around it. Apparently, in the daytime, as the sun hits every side of the mausoleum, this shines inside and has some sort of esoteric effect on the inhabitants inside. Now, the problem is we can't really get inside the mausoleum because the key has been lost for many, many years. And the family, obviously, there are no living descendants of Hannah Courtoy. They're all dead and buried. So, how do we get in? The owners of the graveyard, they're not really interested in getting inside, and there doesn't exist a key that now fits this lock. So I think that was one of the very interesting things that we visited. And when we got there, actually, I met a great man called Stephen Coates, a researcher and also a musician. He told us very strange things about the people that were involved in this, like Joseph Bonamy, who traveled to Egypt, born in London in 1796, to a family of architects, in fact, studied at the Royal Academy, traveled to Rome, and eventually ended up in Egypt and picked up all of these esoteric principles. And this wasn't the only thing that he invented, that he created. He also created the temple works, Flaxmill in Leeds, which also has a very Egyptian-like appearance to it. So there's lots of mysteries about about Hannah, about Joseph, and also other people that were involved in the creation of a mausoleum, like Samuel Alfred Warner. Now, he was born in East Sussex in 1793. He was involved in explosives and other things. He was working with a London chemist. Apparently, he claimed to actually be able to blow up ships in the middle of the channel with invisible shells, almost like psychic-like powers. And there's a rumor that the British Navy actually took him seriously and paid him to carry out these experiments. And it could have been a charlatan. There were lots of charlatans around at that time, but it really does add to the mystery of who she was and what she might have created. And to this day, a lot of people believe that perhaps a time machine tomb could have even influenced the creation of the TARDIS in Doctor Who. Was this based upon the mausoleum, or at least the myth and the rumor about it? You know, so as I was exploring the burial site with Stephen Coates, I found myself really inspired by the possibility that although it might not be a time machine, it's more of a bold attempt to outsmart mortality. You know, a notion more fantastical. It's a testament to human ambition. You know, as compelling as it's mysterious, really. It's drawing us into this extraordinary and encouraging, relentless pursuit of hope and success, and cheating either death or our way into an extended life or a secure afterlife. I think it's a very fascinating mystery. The other things that we've investigated, and there are many, many things that we've looked at, have to do with UFOs. Now, UFOs are really in vogue at the moment, is no exception. And one of the things that we investigated, and this was very interesting to me, having grown up in Wales, was the Broad Haven incident and the Welsh UFO triangle. So this starts in 1977, when this region becomes the epicenter, an intriguing and mysterious UFO sighting. And it earns a designation as the Welsh Triangle, or the Broadhaven Triangle. Now, it's very reminiscent of the Bermuda Triangle, you know, in this mystery that surrounded everything that happened there. So on February 4th, 1977, there's a grey metallic cigar-shaped craft which allegedly descends and lands in a field next to Broadhaven Primary School. And a group of 14 children, you know, boldly claim to witness the craft being there for most of the day. And just 2 weeks later, it's February 17th, 1977, the same craft's seen again. And this time it's by teachers and other local witnesses who just can't believe, you know, what they're seeing. Again, on April 19th, the owner of the Haven Fort Hotel in Little Haven, whose daughter, Francine Grenville, we actually interviewed for Series 2, she described seeing this upside-down saucer in a neighbouring field, and 2 humanoid creatures had got out of the saucer and walked around. And I actually went to the very field where this happened and tried out my EMF device to see if I could pick up anything, and actually stayed in the field looking around the house, seeing what was inside. And she was terrified until they got back in this ship and it took off and left them in peace. And she thought, you know, could this have been a local prankster or something? But she just couldn't explain how and why these men had done this. These beings had visited her. Around about the same time, they started getting visits from these men in black who appeared to have molded hair, almost molded like plastic hair, and completely twin-like faces that appeared to be made of some false material, almost as if they were wearing masks, that visited their house and other houses at the same time. And this went on and on. Now, I talked to David Davis, who was one of the childhood witnesses of that UFO at that time in Broadhaven, who was skeptical. He'd stayed in during lunch and he hadn't gone out to see the spaceship as the children were designating it. And as he walked out to observe the ship, it just took off into the air. And to this very day, David says he doesn't know what he saw. He can't really explain what he saw. And yet he definitely saw this grey cylindrical craft take off into the air. Now, other children actually described men inside, a man coming out with pointy ears and a pointed hat. This is very strange because other people, other residents of that area, when they saw these occupants of the UFOs, they said that they were tall, they had silver suits, they had pointed heads, and they had even pointed ears. Now, there's a very strange phenomenon near this, the Haven Fort Hotel, and the Coombs family farm nearby in Repperton that also had visitations from these beings, called Stack Rock. Now, it's about a quarter mile out to sea from both these farms, which are on the coast. And Stack Rock historically was associated with fairy lore. And in olden times, residents said that you could see the fairies flying and landing in Stack Rock where they had their hidden abode. That really makes you think. Could they, these people, these ancestors of ours, could they have been seeing these UFOs landing in ancient times, as well as at the era times, at Stack Rock? Could that be an epicenter for some of this activity? Or, there is an airbase nearby, as there always is with these things. Or could it just be more, experiments with experimental aircraft from the British Air Force and other more secretive elements of our society? We don't really know. One thing we do know is that these things could not have been drones. Such technology wasn't really available to most people at that time. This is quite a new thing. So it's very strange. Now, we also visited the British UFO archives run by John Hanson, a great man who's collected 25,000 first-hand documents and UFO reports over the last 30 years. And he let us trawl through all of their archive. And if you've seen the series, you'll actually see that we examined the original pictures that those children at the Broadhaven School drew on after the weekend that they'd seen this UFO land, and others besides. So that, to me, that really brought it home. It's not really until you meet some of these people that have seen these things and you find them to be genuine, and you find them to be very regular folk who aren't really after anything. They're not after fame or a celebrity or money, if there was ever such a thing attached to these subjects. They're not really after that. They just can't unsee what they've seen. And that, to me, is always convincing. Whether they saw real UFOs or not, or real alien beings, who knows? What's for sure is that they definitely saw something, and that really stays with me and pushes me on. Now, the show does cover lots of subjects. There's different things. It's county by county, country by country, England, Scotland, Wales. And we don't just do strange and unusual, we also do history and folklore. And one of the things that's very close to my heart in Wales is the King Arthur tales, and especially, and I've got personal interest in this, tales of giants. This was this giant in Wales, around about the area of Snowdonia, called Ritter Gower, and he had a famous battle between that once and future King Arthur. Now, Ritter's tomb, as it's called, is actually on the very summit of Snowdon. You can walk all the way up there, and when you get there, there's a cairn, a stone cairn, as it were, and a few more steps that you take to the top, and on top there's a little marker which shows you what's in every direction from where you're standing. But it is essentially a cairn, and this is known as Ritter's tomb. Ritter's, Ryddigau, or Urwadda, which is the tomb, I think, in Welsh, or something similar to that. Now, it was previously known, I think, as Gwythyr, meaning Ritter's tomb. It's changed since then. Now, the story goes that Rittergow, he was the strongest and most violent of all the giants that inhabited Britain. And during this time, there was various kings all around the island fighting for supremacy and defending their lands from raids by giants who emerged from their mountain caves. And Ritter, he wanted to be more than just the leader of a little band of giants. He was fed up with humans who called themselves kings and said he was stronger and braver and certainly larger than any of them. And he decided that he would campaign against them. Now, he targeted several kings, including two whose kingdoms had been weakened after years of war. And he gathered this army of giants and bandits and came out of the mountains and overthrew these armies. Now, all the kings of Britain, they got together to try to defeat them, but they couldn't, and Ritter emerged victorious. Now, Ritter, after he killed these kings, he took their beards and he made a heavy, thick coat of all these kings' beards as a testament. I've taken your beard, your sign of manliness, and now it's my adornment. It keeps me warm. Now, one day he comes to Arthur, the Saxon slayer, the holder of Excalibur, and he sends a messenger to say, shave off your beard and give it to me. Otherwise, I'm going to come and take it by force. Arthur's really, really enraged by this, and he immediately goes right up to the mountain to fight Ritter at the top. And they both meet at the top of the mountain, and it's cold and chilly, as I can testify after we walked up there one misty, I think, morning in November, just last year, up and down in 6 hours in the rain and the mist. Anyway, he fought the giant, and it was really very close. Finally, with his last ounce of strength, he brings down his sword, Excalibur, on Ritter's skull and kills him. Now, Ritter falls there, and he's buried on top of the mountain. Men pile rocks onto him, and they bury him there, and they call it Gwythyr Ritter, Ritter's tomb. And over time, this evolves into Gwythyr, the tomb, and the unassuming cairn that we see there today is apparently the remains of this. The giant, if legends are true, should be buried beneath. So while we're filming season 2 of Weird Britain, we climbed the mountain, to say, because the train was off for the winter, and we missed it, so we had to climb. I was really taken by the breathtaking views, but also that this is a testament to the belief in Arthur, which you find all around the British Isles, but especially here in Wales, where he's known as the once and future king. And it says that he will return when Wales needs him most, and rise and restore Wales to its former glory. So I thought that was it's a very intriguing prospect. Now, to this day, when we were there were tons of people still climbing the mountain. In the winter, the conditions were very, very dire. But I thought that was, it was a real beautiful symbol of Britain and its people, and how we still, regard these old places, even now, even to this day. Now, looking at Britain and what's weird, or weird in the sense of wonderful about Britain, I don't think you can really look at it without looking at some of our megaliths. Our megaliths are truly wonderful. Everybody knows Stonehenge and other bits and pieces like that, but not a lot of people think about Avebury. Now, Avebury is very close to Stonehenge, and you've got there, the West Kennet Long Barrow and other megaliths close by as well. And there's a lot of activity around Avebury. There's a lot of Druidry there, as well as in Stonehenge. Now, it's in Wiltshire, it's in southwest England. This is a lovely part of the country. It's picturesque. It's got a lot of Britain's history there. And we just thought we'd stop by and meet the Druids, meet the head of the Druids there, who was a lovely chap from the Netherlands, actually, called Henk. He didn't have a beard, which we thought was kind of comical because, of course, stereotypically in our minds, we always think of Druids having beards. So it is the 21st century, I guess. Druids, even the heads of Druids, don't have to have beards anymore, and that's okay by me. But this was an old monument. It's been there since the Neolithic period, we think. It had fallen into significant disuse for many, many, many years, and then back in the 17th and 18th century, when the antiquarians were starting to really get interested in the history of our country, people started breathing new life into it and looking after the site and repairing some of the stones and restanding them and things like that. Now, there's a Druid revival going on in Britain at the moment, which I find very fascinating. And Avebury is a sacred place, not only to the Druids, but also contemporary pagan religions like Wicca and heathenry and those Vikings and others like that as well. And for these believers, the monument's not merely a relic of the past; it's this living temple. It resonates with the spirits of their ancestors and the spirits of that place. And public rites are conducted at the site, not only to draw onlookers, but to, I suppose, to re-embody these forgotten belief systems and religions that once populated the UK. Now, when we were there, we went to the Gorsedd. Now, the Druidic rituals held at Avebury, known as Gorseddau, they're rich in tradition and meaning, because they're engaging, invoking Owlman, Druidic concept symbolizing inspiration and creating a space for that spirituality to inhabit it again. And there's a nice steadford part, like a musical part of that ceremony where everybody is invited. I was also invited and allowed to play a song even amongst them. People perform poems, songs, and stories. There's art, there's community rituals as well. And then everybody typically recites this Druid prayer, which I believe was crafted by Iolo Morgannwg in the 18th century, alongside the Druid vow. And it's amazing. So you feel like you're back in time. You've gone back in time to this place that's seen so many different groups of these people over the years. There's one group called the Gorsedd of Bards, and it dedicates itself to practicing their rites at Avebury. And they carry out these bardic traditions every single year. It's really, really beautiful just to see them singing, to see their poetry. And I found them, especially the Druids out of the whole group, and the bards and the keepers of the stones and everybody else, and Hank himself, the head Druid, I just found them to be a very chilled out, inviting, open bunch. They were more than happy to tell us about their religion, and they weren't sensitive about it. They were able to take a little bit of a jibe at a joke, and were very open about the fact that some aspects of it have had to be reimagined. They don't really know how they would have practiced in the old days, and they're having their best shot of what it might have been. I hope I don't minimize that for any Druids out there, but that was just my understanding of it. And we were there as well just before Samhain, before Halloween, which is a part of the year where they give offerings to their lost loved ones, their ancestors, and people place these apples in the stream, and I forget the name of the stream, apologies, but I just thought it was a beautiful ceremony. Everybody there was quite had made peace with whatever had happened to them, and they were ready to go and honor that person again who is now no longer with us. Very, very wonderful time. There's a lot of folklore in Britain as well, and some of my favorite folklore, being a cryptozoologist by trade, is to do with werewolves and demon dogs and Bigfoot-like creatures. And we actually went to Suffolk. We went to investigate the Beast of Bungay, which is obviously one of the most famous demon dog, black dog stories in the UK. And, I've always wondered if this is a Saxon or colonial folklore transplant. Is this something that's been given to us by the people who came later? So in English folklore, just for anybody who doesn't know, I'm sure most of your audience do know about this, Black Shuck, also known as Old Shuck, it's a ghostly black dog believed to roam East Anglia's countryside and coastline. Now, depending on the folklore, it's either seen as an omen of death or a friendly creature. Descriptions vary across Norfolk, South Suffolk, and the Cambridgeshire Fens and Essex. So that really tells you that this is not only in this part of the country, but it's very popular in this Anglo side of the country. Now, the name Shuck, it comes from the Old English word suka, meaning devil. So the first recorded mention of Black Shuck is in 1850, Notes and Queries by Reverend E.S. Taylor, and describes the dog as a large, shaggy dog possessing fiery eyes, often visiting churchyards at midnight. One of the famous sightings that it's been noted for many years is that of Abraham Fleming in Bungay, who remarked that it was the most curious of all local apparitions. Basically, that it's a resident, it's a local resident that roams in the highways and byways of East Anglia. And if you hear the howl, the chilling howl, then that could actually mean perhaps death or an omen of misfortune for you. Now, when it comes to the legend itself, the one that we investigated, and we went to Bungay, and we even went to Leiston Abbey, where later the skeletal black dog was also discovered, buried. They actually celebrate this legend now in the town. Every single year, there's a Black Shuck festival, and the person who organizes it, I think a local artist, he actually dresses up as the dog. So we interviewed him about Black Shuck as Shuck himself, and inside the church where it was first in Bungay, thought to have appeared on August the 4th, 1577. So that's St. Mary's Church. There's this clap of thunder. Congregation is terrified, and this dog comes running in. A hellish monster flies in, slays many people inside the church, and then moves on to Blythburgh Church, not far away, and does the same thing. And it's really taken the town by storm. It's got a resurgence. There's a whole festival. There are plays. There's a massive black dog that they carry through the town. And again, this artist, he literally dresses up as Shuck with what I can only assume is a very well-made homemade costume, and he's the MC, he's the master of ceremonies for the whole Black Shuck thing. But it's interesting because in Blythburgh there are the alleged hot claw marks on the door where the dog was said to have left its mark, and in Leiston Abbey, or the remains of Leiston Abbey, run by the monks nearby, I think 3 or 4 years ago, they did in fact dig up the skeletal remains of a 7-foot-long dog, a huge dog. Who knows? I mean, it could have just been a very, very large domestic species, but it's so strange that it should be buried there in this part of the country, so close to where these things happened. And it just goes to show really that this legend, or the superstition around the legend, which I can only assume that the skeletal dog was a remnant of that, buried within the Abbey's grounds, holds tight with the people. And even in the 21st century, it's had a resurgence. It's come back, and it's a strange thing. Why? You have to think, why are we actually suddenly entertaining, folklore and fairy tales again, which essentially is what these things are in large part. But I'm sure there's a kernel of truth in it. But we're still talking about, folkloric, supernatural beings, but from the realms of folklore that have been used as boogeyman stories, or to explain terrible things that happen. We know that the steeple in the church in which the Shuck attacked actually collapsed and also killed more people inside the church. So this could have been a very easy answer to what actually happened on that day. Was it really a demon dog, or was the collapse of the church explained in this way? Who knows? Now, moving on from demon dogs, we have a very classic tale that we've discovered and we've investigated for season 2, and that's of the Cottingley fairies. Now, everybody knows this story really, really well, and how it began. Elsie Ride, Francis Griffiths, they come from South Africa to Britain, and they're staying in Cottingley, and they allegedly have these interactions with fairies that they photograph. And later, that very famous author, who I'm a great fan, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he takes those photographs, he publishes them in the Strand magazine, and this makes the girls very, very famous. And the story goes on and on and on until, in their later life, they admit that all but one of them is probably a fake, or at least that was the story. But there's a strange sort of caveat to that. There does seem to be fairy legends in this area. You've got to think, when did they start to believe in fairies? When did they get the spark that fairies might inhabit their surroundings? How is their claim of capturing the fairy camera? Why was it embraced so readily in this area? Now, I think one answer is it's rooted in the enchanting landscape of Cottingley, and that conceals a remarkable treasure, which is a carved rock nestled among the trees above Park Rocks in the northwest corner of Cottingley Wood. Now, myself and the director went searching for this, and we found it. It was very difficult. It's not a monument. It's not known about. In fact, it's within some scout camping grounds deep within Cottingley Woods in Bradford. And I think we must have walked for about 2.5 hours just to find this thing. And eventually had to clear away moss and all of the rest of it just to get a close-up picture of what are essentially it's a big rock showcasing simple cups, rings, and grooves. So it's a cup and ring stone, essentially, and it was known as the fairy stone. Now, could this, a circular formation with dozens of fairy cups all over it, could this have influenced the fairy tales of the girls who came up with the Cottingley fairy hoax? Could it have influenced them to create that hoax, or to believe that fairies were real, or what they were putting together and imagining was real in some way? And these cup and ring marks, they go back to ancient times. They echo the whispers of history all across the British Isles and Europe and the Near East. That's how far these things go back, and they seem to really tie in to this fairy legend. And as far as I'm aware, nobody's ever really looked into that before. They may have, I'm not sure. But for me, it was a fascinating thing. Did this cup and ring stone, this Cottingley Woods fairy tale, did that influence these two girls and cause them to come up with this? Now, we've got a present fascination with fairies, haven't we? Just as with Druidism and everything else, some of these old interests, beliefs, faiths, and folklores are coming back. And, cryptozoology and ghost hunting and the rest of it too. It seems to be more like a revival in some way of this late 19th, early 20th century adventurism. We're interested in strange and unusual things, again, diverse beliefs and customs and folklores, and we seem to want to reinvent them, or at least revive them and bring them back. And I personally have nothing against that, but I find it's very interesting. Now, as part of this episode, we also went to a fairy ball, Glastonbury, which is the capital of everything strange in Britain, isn't it? And we saw we interviewed a lovely lady there called Karen Kay, who's a fairy whisperer. She writes about this as well. She got some books about it. She's a practitioner, I believe. But we also found out that this really is loved among people. Everybody dressed up. But it wasn't just a costume ball. It was, I think there was something votive about it, for want of a better explanation. There's something quite votive about what they were doing. It was almost an emulation that had a level of respect in it. It wasn't just like pretty girls in funny dresses with fairy wings on, if that makes any sense. And that to me, felt like a nice thing. Now, we've been to Cornwall 3 times in this series, and I just love it there. It seems to be that Celtic side of me can feel the Celtic side of Cornwall, even though it's largely considered a very Anglified place in this time. I feel it there. I feel it in the stones and the bones and everything about them, even the way that their legends run seems to have a real sort of Celtic vibe to it. And we went to the town of the village of Zennor to investigate that very famous tale of the Mermaid of Zennor. And it's a great Cornish folk tale. Basically, it's about a beautiful and mysterious woman whose otherworldly presence captivates a young man in a local church, Zennor Church. We went to the church, and he finds himself irresistibly drawn to her ethereal charms and alluring grace. And as the tale unfolds in this lovely seaside village, it's a sunny Sunday, and this beautiful woman enters the church, and Matthew Truella, he's one of the congregants, and he's singing in the choir. In fact, he's a got a beautiful voice. He's a great singer, and he's handsome and approachable, and he's very warm, and he's a good congregant, he's a good Christian. The church, everybody regards him well, and she falls in love with him. She comes and she listens to him every Sunday until eventually she lures him into the sea, and he disappears forever. He's never seen again. Now, it's kind of funny actually, because there's another legend attached to that, which is years and years later, some sailors, there's some fishermen, they're sort of fishing nearby, and they see this mermaid, and she comes up. She basically tells them, can you move? Can you remove your nets, because you're blocking the entrance to my home? And they immediately, they're sort of a bit freaked out. They obey. They move. They move out of her way, and she gets to go home. But inside the church, there's the Mermaid Chair, and it has this beautiful carving, now quite decayed, of the mermaid on the side of it. She's holding musical instruments. I think she's got maybe a tambourine and a lyre or something like that. And it's said that if women who are failing to conceive go into the church and sit on the chair, that they will indeed become pregnant. Now, I wondered about this legend. Could it have something to do with Saint Sonara or even Danae? So Saint Sonara, she was this widow whose life was marked by tragedy. And she's got a feast day on the May 1st. And her story is intertwined with that of somebody called Asenor, who's the mother of St. Brudoc. He's a revered 5th century Breton monk and bishop. Now, she was a beautiful Breton princess from the coastal town of Brest. Her life takes a dark turn when her husband, this jealous king of Breton, accuses her of infidelity. And in his anger, he casts her into the sea in a wooden barrel while she's pregnant. She floats in the treacherous waters off Cornwall's shores, and an angel graces her and guides her through her plight. Now, miraculously, she gives birth to a son, and he becomes the beloved St. Brudoc, recognized later as an Irish bishop. Now, eventually, as Zennor washed on the rocky Cornish coast, she establishes the village of Zennor before continuing her journey across the sea to Ireland. And Saint Sonora's legacy also lives on in that church. That Saint Sonora's church is the one in Zennor as well, and the statue of the saint is there as well. I just wondered, could this have an even older origin in that of Danae? Remember the story, as we know from the film Clash of the Titans, which was slightly morphed, where Chryseus puts his daughter and her child Perseus into a chest and casts them into the sea. Could this have a similar origin as well? Could that have affected not only the tale of Saint Sonora, but then the further tale, the newer tale, as it were, albeit relatively new, tale of the Mermaid of Zennor. Perhaps, who knows? We do find over time, and I'm sure Britain's no different in this respect, that tales and mythology seems to be recycled throughout the world. And it's wonderful to think that we might have had, albeit a couple of 100 years old now, another reimagining of this tale that took hold in the tranquil village of Zennor. Now, Cornwall does have some modern day mermaids, which you'll see if you watch the show as well, in the form of a lovely lady called Mischief and her friends, who are environmentalists and free divers. And they have manufactured mermaids' tails, which they wear and swim with, which weigh about 16 kilos. And they teach people about the ocean, and they also teach them about environmentalism and conservation, which is, a wonderful way to, again, reimagine this mermaid tale for the modern era as well. Let's have a quick drink. Now, looking at Cornwall, the weird and the wonderful just seems to really inhabit that place. And I really love the story of the Mary Lloyd of Wales and the Obios of Cornwall, because these are two kissing cousins. These are two of the same types of folklore, excuse me, that exist in both the Celtic enclaves of Wales and Cornwall. But now there's a tradition that's been going on for the last 10 years in Cornwall called the Dark Gathering. And both of these skeletal horses of Wales and Cornwall, they come together. And they come together into the middle of Tintagel, and accompanied with their teasers. That's the person who sort of dances around and encourages the Obios and the Mary Lloyd to keep going, to enter into the town. And they have something called a punko, which is almost like a rap battle in the middle of the town, which I witnessed and photographed and filmed. And I was just really amazed by this. So they sing to one another after they've met each other, after dancing through the town from either direction. They sing to one another, one in Welsh and the other in Cornish. And eventually one relents and lets the other win. Now, this is the Obios' territory. So essentially, there's the Obios that has to relent and let the Mary Lloyd in. But I just thought, this is amazing. This stuff is still going on. The crowd wasn't full of middle-aged to older people like myself. It was really, there were young people, there were children there even. Everybody in the town of Tintagel was really getting into it. I looked into it a little bit and I thought, well, this isn't the only similar tradition around the country. There's and there's tons of Morris dances there too, by the way. There's also other things like the Old Tup, which is a sort of a hobby horse that you can find in Kent in England. It embodies like a spirit that comes in processions to bring communities together. You've got the Padstow Obios, which obviously is a variation of Tintagel's, and also the Kentish Hooden Horse, which I thought was quite interesting. Now, they do come around about sort of Halloween time, but then also people, the Mary Lloyd will appear around Christmas time. And it seems to sort of knock on the doors of people, and there's a sort of an engagement, which I think sometimes insults trade, and I couldn't quite work that bit out with them. But if you lose the battle with Mary Lloyd on the door, that's it. They have to be allowed into the house, and they can take anything they like from the cupboard. So, that's a little troubling. But, definitely a legend that seems to be worth keeping, in my view. And talking about old traditions and legends, people, I don't know what age you are, but I definitely remember dancing around the maypole as a child. We did it every year in school up until about age 10, maybe even, which would have been the sort of mid-80s. And I just didn't think it happened anymore. I really didn't. I thought that was it. We left it behind. there were no maypoles. And we were filming in Worcestershire for series 2. We went to a place called Offanem for the Offanem Wake and maypole, and they have Europe's tallest maypole there. Basically, it's absolutely huge, and the whole town comes out to celebrate this. And we have Morris dancers from all around the country, local ones too, that come to celebrate the maypole. Now, I didn't really know where the maypole would come from. I can see this sort of has a Germanic origin to it. You know, there has some paganistic kind of links as well, perhaps from the Iron Age or some similar period. But I just didn't think there was any modern significance for this. And yet, this town really went for it. They've got the largest maypole. They had Morris dancers from all over the place, and they proffered a few theories on it. One was perhaps this was a link to the veneration of sacred trees, or perhaps Thor's oak, or even Yggdrasil, or something like that. Could it have those kind of pagan roots? But it's definitely something that's stayed with us, and I think it's worth keeping. Now, one of the things that happens with the Morris dances, obviously, is they have their own particular dances, and I managed to get involved in one or two of them, which I personally thought were a little bit blue, to be honest with you. These old ladies, they really put me through my steps, but it was really great. There's a lot of complex dances performed by practice dancers like the May Queen dancing troops and others like that. But definitely, something memorable and worth holding on to. And I'm glad I was not shy, and I swallowed my pride and jumped in and gave it a go, because it was really, really something. And also that pole, 75 feet in height, it's special. That's a special thing, and that's the tallest in Europe. They've kept it. It's in pristine condition. They've kept it that way for a very, very long time. Now, there's lots of things we can talk about. I don't know how long you want to go on, Caroline, but I would like to talk about cabinets of curiosities, because there was one in London belonging to Victor Wind, known as Victor Wind's Cabinet of Curiosities, which is in the Last Tuesday, part of the Last Tuesday Society. And this also, this was something from the 19th century. This was something we used to be into. All of these curious made-up animals from all around the world that were usually, amalgamations of different bits and pieces of things. And yet it's become popular again. So I went, and this is in Bethnal Green in London, I went to Victor Wind's Cabinet of Curiosities, and I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it might have been something that would be a little bit stomach-churning, but no, actually, they were very artistic amalgamations of things, and they're very artistic creations. I saw a wolfin. I saw a Sasquatch, I think, made out of the behind of a deer. That was quite interesting. And many other things like lizard men and gigantic golden hippo skulls taken from Pablo Escobar and other people. But one of the most interesting things there was a coffin coffee table, which essentially was a dining table with a real-life skeleton within a glass tomb inside. And we sat there. I sat there with a lion who was in the seated position and enjoyed a lovely coffee. And it was, it was quite a thing. Now, I know this goes back. It was explained to me. It's all to do with patomechanics and pataphysics, and this all started in the 1800s and the early 1900s, and there's a lot more to it, really. This is about essentially remaking, the reality of nature and the surreal, all at once. But for me, it was just a really lovely and peculiar take on the old curio shop, or some sort of traveling circus. And it was an absinthe bar to add insult to injury. So, You can imagine what kind of visitations you'd have after having 3 or 4 absence in a place like that. It really was something special. I'll finish off with this one. I won't go much further than this, but that's on crop circles. Now, we did an episode in Wiltshire, and we went to the Barge Inn, Honey Street, in Wiltshire. Now, the Barge Inn is well known, and it's painted inside to reflect that, as the epicenter of crop circle makers. So Adrian Partu, he was a pub landlord who basically transformed this pub in 1993 into like a worldwide haunt for not only crop circle seekers, but crop circle makers. And this secretive, not so secretive, society of circle makers, they would gather there every week and decide what they were going to do, whose farmer's field was going to get their crop circle next. Now, it features crop circles all across the walls and the ceilings, and there's a gigantic iron crop circle hanging as a sort of almost as a pub sign in the pub garden. And it's got a campsite there and a lovely music bar downstairs, and you can see them everywhere. These crop circles are carved into the wood, they're on the walls, they've really leaned into it. But we actually interviewed a guy there who began working there in the 90s, and he was intrigued by these men. They kept meeting in the corner. They were always whispering quietly to each other, and he got involved with them, basically became one of these secretive circle makers. Now, as we were investigating this pub and crop circles in Wiltshire, we actually found out about a completely fresh circle that had happened the day before. We sort of rushed along to see it, and sure enough, it was absolutely huge, like an eye almost, with some shapes and a decoration around it, but huge. It must have been at least a field wide. And it was very interesting because we got there and looked around the circle, and you could clearly see, as they described, where the wood had been pressed and then turned in certain corners, especially where there were angles. Clearly was a man-made circle in this instance. But what was interesting about it is, as we were investigating the field, about 60 tourists from countries all around the world made their way down this tiny country lane in a huge coach, and then disembarked and began wandering around the crop circle, lying down, meditating and chanting. And later we interviewed them and found that many claimed to have experienced strange phenomena such as visions, warmth, even restored eyesight, or a sense of youthful transformation. In fact, one lady said, "I walked in old and I came out young." And it was very strange. And there was one guy I spoke to. He seemed to be their leader. I spoke with him. He was an American chap, and he's talking about some narrative about the Sumerians and other ancient visitors to Wiltshire having done this and left healing powers behind in the circle. And if you had belief and faith, it'd have a profound effect on you, regardless of the circle's origins. But it did intrigue me as to, I suppose, how faith really plays a part in that. To us, it was clearly a manufactured crop circle. After speaking to the circle makers in the Barge Inn, we know how they were done, and we know that they are commonly done, or less commonly these days. And yet, for the faithful, it really did seem to have some very significant effect. Would you like me to do one or two more? Does anybody want one or two more? Or I realise I've just been speaking at you guys for about an hour.
Andy, we're absolutely in awe of you. You're an incredible speaker. If you would like to carry on and speak, nobody is going to object.
We'll return to that conversation in just a moment. But if we have an ask of you, we ask that you hit the like button here, and we ask that you hit the subscribe button. Now, the reason is, for you it is just a moment, but for us, it really helps the algorithm find our content, and other people find what really is deeply interesting to them.
Okay, well, I've got one or two more on there, and I'll just tell you. And I've got my sheet, my information sheets in front of me. Obviously, I can't remember all of this in my head, but I did write it at least. I'll tell you. I'll do Owlman and maybe one more, and then we'll leave it, because those are things. Okay. Okay, so the Owlman, as a cryptozoologist or cryptozoology enthusiast, more like really, because I'm not a zoologist, the Owlman's a big one for me. And this ties into reports of unidentified flying cryptids in the British Isles. And there seem to be reports of lots of different things like that. Pterosaur-like creatures, even large predatory birds, giant headless bats, bipedal man-like owls. It doesn't seem really likely that such a thing could exist in Britain. And yet, once again, like we said, with some of the witnesses who see things, when you get to speak to them, it's hard really to deny that they at least believe that what they saw was real. So I don't think we're talking about a resident breeding population of whatever these animals are. I think it's more that something is stopping off occasionally, jumping off point, if you will, a rest stop on a long journey to somewhere else, wherever that may be, which of course is a great get out of jail free card. It makes it easier if they're not local, right? But for the most part, I think if there is some possible taxa of these cryptids, it's got to be something that's either a common and easily made mistake, like like some kind of owl, a large owl species, for example, or like the eagle owl, or it's something we've never heard of before. But the sightings are very interesting. So it starts with the Owlman of Mornan, or the Death Raptor, as it's known. And we investigated this. We went to the church where it happened, Mornan Old Church in Cornwall. And I have to say, I was expecting something that looked spooky and creepy, like churches can sometimes, or the tumble-down graveyard. And it wasn't. It was beautiful. It was intact. There was an old lady tending flowers in the graveyard. It was just the most lovely, relaxing, tranquil church I've ever been to. In fact, it was the last place I'd expect to see a 5-foot-tall death raptor anyway, even after dark. But it starts with these two girls, aged 9 and 12, and they claim to have seen a birdman hovering above the tower of Mornan Old Church in Cornwall. And they run away. They run away and they report the incident with their families to the police, and they're taken to separate rooms to give their statements. And allegedly, they sketch the same creature, and has this big effect on them. They're traumatized. And another sighting occurs later when several witnesses see a large man-like owl sitting on a large branch in the pine tree, and they're convinced that someone's playing a prank on them, someone in a costume. Then it takes off and flies away, and they hear this crackling sound like static electricity after the creature leaves. And there's been many, many other sightings over the years. Same, around the churchyard, around the forest near the churchyard. They see red lights floating over the church roof sometimes. And it's described as a 5 to 6 foot tall, grey-brown owl with a black mouth, black pincer-like claws, red glowing eyes, and a wingspan about 10 feet across. So it's a big creature. It emits like a screeching or a hissing noise. It's a big, big animal. And sightings go on. There have been some in modern times, but the witnesses aren't wanting to go public with that. But there's been a few recent sightings too. It's not the only one in the country. There was also an Owlman sighted in Haverfordwest in the 1960s when a crew member on a merchant navy ship was walking drunk through St. Thomas Churchyard in Haverfordwest at night. Excuse me, and he's frightened out of his wits by this giant owl that flies from a tree and lands right in front of him. And he sobers up pretty quickly in terror and flees into the local pub and tells everybody what he's seen: a 6 foot tall owl with the legs of a man, the wings of a bird, and a round face made up of white hair. And feathers and a protruding nose, he says, not a beak, which is strange. And he's met with ridicule. Obviously, everybody in the pub thinks he's had too many to drink, and that's it. They laugh him out of there. Many years later, November 2013, a young couple claimed they encountered the same large feather-covered man in the churchyard again. Only this time, the creature runs sort of towards them, past them, literally just dashes right past them, and they're terrified and they flee out of the churchyard. Now, nobody really knows what these things are. The Eurasian eagle owl is a great candidate, obviously, because it's got a wingspan of approximately 7 feet. That sounds like a great candidate for a monster imposter, really, doesn't it? And I suppose if you've never seen an animal like that, when it stands up and stretches out, it might appear to be bigger than it actually is. So there's a good possibility, and there are a few resident pairs of eagle owl, a few breeding pairs in the country, but it's not usual. It is not normally found here, and I think usually in the north of England is where you find one or two of them. And then other people think something like a flying fox could be the answer. Perhaps somebody's kept a flying fox as a pet, and we talked about that as well. Is it possible flying fox could? But the fruit bats, really, this is not great country for them. And if they were seen out, I think sooner or later, one of these things roosting in a tree would really stand out. Of course, when they roost in trees, they hang upside down. They don't stand on top of branches and take off from a standing position. So that's not really in there. Common crane was something else that was mentioned to us, and I think that's a good one, actually, because that's quite a tall animal. It's iron grey, this bird, could be described as whitish, in certain lights. It's got a massive wingspan, and perhaps if it was facing head on to you and you couldn't really see the parameter of the beak, it might really look like something else. There was something else that somebody else mentioned, which was bioluminescence, these red lights that are seen over the church with these glowing red eyes. And in olden times, dragons often were thought to be breathing fire, weren't they, or to be glowing a fiery red. And I wonder, certain animals, just throwing out there, could have developed some kind of bioluminescence, and could this have been something that we mistook in ancient days, for a dragon-like beast or something like that? That's a mystery to me. I love those kinds of stories because essentially there really is no good explanation for what people are seeing. Even the most impressionable of us on seeing a large owl would figure out within a few seconds that we're looking at an owl. That's got to be an owl, and a normal owl, or maybe a large owl, but not something that's a monster like this thing is said to be. But one of the joys of cryptozoology, which I like, which is essentially the mysteries are never solved. I'll end with this one, which is the Welsh Atlantis, Cantragwaelod. It's often romantically referred to as Wales Atlantis, and it's got this steep, this really rich folklore, basically. But there's a caveat to it as well, which there are remains of a sunken forest in Borth, in Cottingley, where the Welsh Atlantis was supposed to be located. And I really love it. So we went with Weird Britain to visit the sunken forest in Borth to investigate the story of Cantragwaelod, the Welsh Atlantis. And the story is very funny because for me it's a story of sloth and laziness and not doing your job properly. So according to the legend, Cantragwaelod is prosperous and a fertile lowland, and it's filled with vibrant life. It's a flourishing civilization, and it's got 16 thriving cities based within it. And it's ruled by the benevolent, wise king, Gwyddno Garantir, and his palace is called Caer Wrthno. And it was said to rise up near the coast, in this huge grand palace near the coastal town of Aberystwyth. And it had golden spires and this great architecture and everything else. So this is this wonderful kingdom, basically. And but it's based upon Cardigan Bay, which is precariously below sea level and safeguarded by this formidable sea wall, and they stood as sentinels against the encroaching ocean. So the task of maintaining the vital sea defences, they fell to Southernan as a revered guardian and as a stalwart friend of King Gwyddno. So nepotism, that's where the problem always starts, right? He was a mate. He gave his mate a job, essentially. And each evening he had the weighty responsibility of securely closing the sea gates. And that ritual was crucial for protecting the kingdom from the tides. However, one fateful night, amidst the laughter and the partying, this huge feast, he gets drunk. He's taken away with the music. He's dancing. He's drinking. He loses track of time. He forgets to close the gates. And that night, nature's unleashed. This fierce storm roars to life, and it just crashes violently through the town, submerges all of the city and the countryside surrounding that have been protected by the sea wall. And this flood basically ends the life of Cantre'r Gwaelod, and that all the inhabitants who can, they flee. Well, the law narrates that this kingdom was irrevocably lost beneath the sea, and there was no trace left of its splendour. Yet, an ancient submerged forest was found after a big storm. I think 2019, it might have struck first of all, and it veiled the remains of hundreds, thousands maybe, of gnarled, dead tree stumps. So there's an oak, pine, birch, willow, hazel. There's all of these different types of breeds of trees there. And when the tide goes out far enough, you can see these trees, which are 4,500 years old, apparently. And it's amazing. So we went with Weird Britain down to the sea and interviewed a lovely lady there called Maxine Allenson, who's a local folklorist and forager, healer. And she told us all about the legend of Cantre'r Gwaelod and took us to see the stumps. Now, in typical Weird Britain fashion, we do a lot of things on the fly, and the tide was in. So we couldn't see the stumps. So we had to wait until, I think it was 11:45 at night for the tide to go out far enough to see the stumps. And see them we did. And it really was fantastic to think that behind every folklore, behind every tale, no matter how mutated or hybridized it becomes, or personalized it becomes in our culture over time, there's always a kernel of truth. And I think that's the wonderful thing. And that's what makes Weird Britain wonderful.
Andy,
I think I'll leave it there. That'll probably be enough before I bore you.
No, never bore us. Thank you on behalf of all of us in ASSAP. You are an incredibly engaging speaker. I could listen to your storytelling all day. It's great. But you firmly nailed your cryptozoology and cryptids interest to the mast. Folklore is a huge subject. How did you stretch out past that? What was it that encouraged you to move past cryptids into folklore and hauntings?
I had been thinking about origins of cryptozoological stories for a while. Nessie is a great example of that, because actually people think Nessie's tale started in 1933, but they actually go back hundreds and hundreds of years, not just to St. Columba, but all the time in between as well. Lots of the local lochs and lochans around Scotland and the coastal lochs as well, have stories of these monsters dating back even further. And also they stretch out to the Middle Ages and even to the Victorian age, until finally Nessie becomes their star. And I thought, well, this is amazing, because essentially we've got a long list of these waterhorse stories travelling throughout the entire history of Scotland. And yet one could really say that these are all folklore. A dragon here, a dragon there, a water horse here. It's the same thing, essentially. It's a water dragon of a kind. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. How much of what we believe in today is just folklore reinterpreted for the modern age? Now, that doesn't mean that the folklore isn't true or doesn't have a kernel of truth like Cantre'r Gwaelod. But it does mean that essentially there's something in us culturally that needs that in every generation. We just find different ways to frame it.
So what I have noticed in season 1, which I've gone back and been watching again so that I've got the info with you tonight, is quite heavy on folklore. Why was it less hauntings that was given over?
In the first one, actually, we did have a few hauntings, but I think we weren't really aware of, and it's an area in which we have no expertise whatsoever. We weren't really where to go. So we had that little time with the Gloucester boys there, but that was really investigating an area that might have some presence. We weren't really looking for a particular haunting. And I know in Bodmin Jail, they also Sydney went there and did a bit with Kirsten, which was very lovely. In number 2, there's lots of hauntings. There's lots of ghostly tales and lots of hauntings, and Andy even gets involved with a few bits of equipment he doesn't know how to use very well, and but in the best possible way. Because for me, I think I've always been of the opinion, I have my own beliefs about things. I've always been of the opinion that it's an exciting world, essentially. And don't close yourself off to anything. Don't open yourself completely either, but be prepared to have a look. And if you've got an open and clear mind about things, you might find something very interesting. I can give you a tale. Actually, we went to the Edinburgh Vaults. And within the Edinburgh Vaults, which I think is the old Reiki tour side of the Edinburgh Vaults, they're all over the place, there we were shown several vaults. And one of the vaults at the end, there was a big stone circle that was once used by a local Wicca group. And apparently they had a problem there. They said that they let out a spirit, and then they had to confine it within the circle. So they left that room and moved all of their equipment into an end room, which has like an iron gate, a hinge gate sort of in front of it. That's dropped a bit, so it's held closed. It's a breeze block, a brick, holding it closed. Anyway, so we'd been talking about ghosts and hauntings in the old Ricky tour, and the director and the guest I was interviewing, they went to the bottom to set up the cameras to film another segment in front of the vault that now holds the Wiccan materials that have been stored there. And I had to go up and get another camera. It's all low lights. It's just green lights, like emergency lights and low light. And I thought, oh, we've left the camera in the room with the stone circle. I'll just go and get it. So I went up and I got it, and I couldn't get the camera out without walking through the circle. So I thought, I'll just walk through the circle. It's fine. And I walked through the circle and turned and started coming back down the hall. And then there was some kind of excitement from the boys at the end. The director is quite skeptical about this stuff. I said, what's wrong? And they had, bearing in mind, they had their cameras pointing right at the door, and the gate opened itself 3 times. So pushed against the brick, 1, 2, 3, and opened the gate. And no, it was changing the batteries in the camera. No batteries, no footage. No. It was just there because we weren't shooting. He was just changing everything. I'm going to get a camera. I'll be back in 2 minutes. That's it. And even the guest, well, I've never seen that before. It's a bit strange. No, I did try to recreate it. I pulled the door up. It's a hinge door. I thought, well, maybe it's sprung, maybe it's pressure, maybe it's vibration. We tried all of that stuff, and we couldn't make it happen again because it had to push a brick out, essentially, at its bottom 3 times and move it. So that happened. We also had another situation in Shipton Mallet Prison, where... Was it Shipton Mallet? No, I'm sorry, it wasn't there. It happened to me. No, it did happen in the Shipton Mallet prison where the EMF meter started going a bit crazy. And I always make sure the phone is off. The phones are actually nowhere near. We don't have them on us if we have those because you don't want any interference. And also the old trip to Jerusalem, we did some of the ghost stories there. The Haunted Galleon had a very strong EMF reading just near the back where there are no lights or wires or anything like that. So that's interesting to me. I mean, EMF is disputable, it's debatable, but I'm not a believer. So for me, that's curious, that's interesting. Okay, that's strange. I always say never defend the indefensible. Cryptozoology teaches you that. You can look pretty foolish pretty quickly if you do. I'm always just curious about how, what we see and what we find. And that happened, no matter what we did. Where we put this EMF anywhere in that room, even next to lights and electrical things, only the very back of the Haunted Galleon would give us a massive reading. So we're like, okay, well, there's something in it. And there's a few other ghost bits besides, but I won't give those away.
Fabulous. I look forward to watching series 2. So for me, somebody who's a researcher and writer for hauntings and ghosts, the folklore and crypto that you look at within your series just gives you a general insight, and the learning curve for someone like me, because I'm very much specialized on just research into hauntings. This has really opened my eyes up for what else is out there. But picking up, before we hand over to Christian for the questions, I've been taking lots of notes while you've been talking, so many. Oh, wow. But I can see that we've got a lot of questions here. So,
oh dear.
No, in Somerset, which is where I'm based, I'm 22 minutes away from Glastonbury. Okay. We've got a new property there now that we've been given to to research and to run events if they want. And then it's not known to the public. And this is what my unique selling point is, that I look and research places that aren't known. So I love that. And we've got all these places around us, but we're steeped in history. We've got so much linking in. Wassailing was what you were talking about, the maypole dancing.
Yes, yes.
So wassailing, it goes back to the Druids and Celtic beliefs that you would ward off evil spirits by having wassailing. And it's the, the Morris dancers with their pig bladders that they would use, and setting fire within the orchards that's supposed to welcome a healthy harvest. And wassail in Old English was wes pu hel, and it means being well or healthy. So I do know that, because literally 2 minutes up behind my village is where we have our local wassailing. And the
drink meat.
Yeah, they have a ceremony every year. It's fabulous. And then they have like the Morris dancers and the the country dancing. So it's something that we all throw ourselves into very deep. But yeah, I'm loving learning more from your series.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's surface level, of course, because we don't have a lot of time. And my introduction to the subjects is often 45 minutes before I get to see the guest. And I'm trying to absorb 3 or 4 pages of material to talk to them about when I get there, because we might do a 12-hour day and shoot 3 or 4 different things. We're quite a small crew. But I still do really, really find it fascinating, and it helps because essentially I really am interested in everything they're telling me. It's new to me every time, and that's wonderful.
So over the different areas within the UK, you have such a correlation and a crossover of folklore. And it seems to be that there's an element of truth in most of these folklores, like the black dog. It's very similar. Back in the Victorian times, they were big into telling stories. Do you think that this storytelling was really spread across the country through travelling salesmen or market sales?
I think a lot of what we're seeing now, actually, a lot of its resurgence and the format in which we absorb it is to do with the Victorian times, because that was the time when we wanted to know about curious things again. That's why we had travelling circuses and cabinets of curiosity and all other types of things. Tales of, we wanted to know what was outside our realm and what used to be here that we've forgotten about. Somebody told me something very interesting about the Welsh hats, the costumes that the Welsh ladies wear, that they became popular during Victorian times. I don't know if this is true or not, but that it was kind of made up for them, or sort of reinvented for the tourists coming to see those Welsh ladies. And I thought, well, if that's true, I wonder what else is like this. And I think even with some of the types of spiritualism, I'm not an expert on this, but I get a feeling that some of the types of spiritualism that we're involved in now have a root there. At least their resurgence has some root there. And I'm interested to look further and see what that might be, how that harkens back and how it might have affected the way we see things now. Certainly, sorry to labor the point. I did a little article on cryptids in the United States of America and in South America. And one in particular was called the duende, which is more like a dwarf-like creature that lives in the forest. And the duende is known throughout Central and South America, Spain, Portugal, and the Philippines. So I thought, well, isn't that interesting? All Spanish colonial territories. I'm sure they didn't import duende into those places as a sort of little miniature being to inhabit this is something that they've inherited. In North America, even with its Dogman and Bigfoot, those have real direct lines of sight to woodwows, trolls, and werewolves and things like that as well. And I think it's interesting. Either we sent that folklore over there and they absorbed it and reinterpreted it and sent it back to us later, or it affected the way they interpreted their own folklore. And so they gave those names to the things they also had. But it's interesting. I'm wondering, from the Victorian period, have we forgotten what they reintroduced to us and are we only refining it? Could that be a possibility?
Very much so. Very much so. So I can see that the time is ticking on, and I know that there are so many questions from members watching. So I'm going to hand over to Christian to go through those questions with you. Again, thank you so much. Very, very engaging.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. That was engaging, to say the least. I was just sat there with like reference books going through stuff and what people were saying in the comments books.
Gosh, I hope I didn't get anything wrong.
Not at all. So actually, my question comes from a very production standpoint, because I'm very logistics minded in regards to productions and putting things together. So in regards to the television production of Weird Britain, I mean, how are those topics and locations chosen? And further to that, is future productions a place where suggestions can be put forth?
Yes, definitely suggestions can be put forward. So the production, actually, Weird Britain was created by Matt Everett, who is also the director of Big Cat Britain, or Panthera Britannia, I think it's called. And he was somebody who saw a big cat in his neighborhood in Somerset, in the Quantocks, and then went on this mission to find out what was behind these sightings. And then later on, he moved into folklore and other bits and pieces. And we met, and he said, asked me if I would present this show for him, which I'd never done any presenting before. And he basically said, look, we'll sort of coach you a little bit as you go along. I won't let you go out with spinach in your teeth. So the show is just him and me getting together, primarily him. We choose county by county, sighting by sighting. The network doesn't have any choice in anything we do. They don't ask us for anything. We make the show and then we give it to them. And they don't really even know what's coming until it comes. It is county by county as far as England is concerned. And in Wales and Scotland, we do the country each time, each series as a whole. But suggestions are definitely very valid. I think some of the episodes coming up in Series 3, Oxfordshire, Hertfordshire, Shropshire, Hampshire, and we'll definitely probably get up to Cumbria at some point as well. So anything anyway you can think of, even if it's places we've done before, just let us know. We'd be happy to have a chat with you. You can, in fact, people can email me, Facebook me directly. Happy for you to put my Facebook on or email, and you can just talk to me and tell me what they want to do.
Excellent. So I can recall there's an episode mid-season where you received training of the Civil War reenactment. So what was your experience of that episode going into effectively recreating Civil War decoration and obviously armor and weapons and so on?
Those men were very, very serious men, and one of the main guy I had the sword fight with, he was showing me, and he's a lovely guy. He really knows what he's doing, but he was serious. So he showed me the blocks I should do, and I did them. As he put the sword down, it went really hard, and I realized that if I hadn't held it really tight above my head, it would have followed through. And I said, "Oh, careful there. It always feels like you mean it." And he looked at me dead in the eyes and he said, "I always mean it." It's like, wow. Wow, I believe you. But these men take they take it seriously. There's more reenactment stuff, by the way, in Series 2. And in Series 3, we might try to do like a really huge event for reenactments, because I think LARPing, it's awesome. It's awesome. I don't care what anybody thinks of it. I think getting dressed up as whatever period of the past that you want to reenact and doing it, I've got nothing but respect for it. I think it takes a lot of love and a lot of courage to just go out there and do it. And I didn't even get involved for serious, not even for the show.
Awesome. Yeah, I've got quite a few friends who are involved with, they work as almost like semi-professional stuntmen and extras, where they film the battle scenes in movies. So when there's a big fight scene in a movie or a TV show, it's generally it's the same squad of people who are doing it, from Kingdom of Heaven to Robin Hood to Troy and so on. I know them guys quite well, and they're always like, yeah, come on board. You'll love it. Just dress up, get in there. Professional
LARPers, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and there's a talent. Anybody watching it thinks when you are fighting with those real swords and shields and firing, dead end arrows at each other, but they're still firing something that can hit you in the eye and blind you.
Yes,
it's real. You can get hurt. It's a real thing.
So there's a comment here from Mark Wallace in regards to the Brompton Cemetery you made, that it reminds him of the Glock, which is the Nazi bell, if you might know it, which allegedly is a device that has anti-gravitational effects. There might also be a time machine. There's connections to like the Vril Society and so on. Very fascinating story.
There's a load of them around London as well. Other graveyards that apparently have either creations by Joseph Bonamy or something related to him. I was going to dive deeper into it, but I didn't manage to yet. But yeah, I mean, it really left a huge effect on architecture of that period. But this, I think that's to do with this 19th century, this Victorian fetishism. I did it. Fetishism. In that people, they really were diving deep into spiritualism, esoteric principles, the possibilities of time travel, the possibilities of almost supernatural power being given by an object or some sort of technology that could be created through certain materials and objects. And I think that's, a mix of esoteric principles plus technology. This mix, and it's very interesting. I think we should get into all these. We should bust all these things open and have a look inside and see, just find out what's really in there. Because the mystery is one thing, but we've got to know.
There was suddenly a time in that late 1800s period where there was adventure clubs set up by philanthropists and people who had a lot of money, who basically were like, "What do we do? Where do we go around the world?" And they were clearly inspired by folklore, mythology, stories, history, and culture. They wanted to go there, and they, of course, brought a lot of stuff back. And I assume that also generated more interest in those other people. So you said that really comes out of that Victorian kind of what's out there kind of adventure spirit, and I think that's wonderful. Although some people might consider it to be a bit, I guess the word might be we stole from those people. But actually,
it was. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, not at all. I would just think. Some people would interpret that as being we took something from them, but actually we're a kind of people that actually are very interested in the world. We're to engage those people. So some people might consider it to be a bit naughty, but actually at the same time, it's really quite endemic of we're very fascinated, we're very curious here.
I agree with you. And I was, I say the age of exploration is not dead. We just lost interest. And it's not the age of exploration in a sense with that connotation of the mindset of those colonial times. So the other thing I was going to mention at those times is it was peak British Empire. So not only could rich people go and explore, but they could go almost anywhere in the world within the empire, some of the other European empires, in safety because of who they were and because of the empire they came from. So in a sense, it was the best time. It was without its dangers, but it was the best time to travel in that way for people of that strata of society. So I think it's of its time. Now this is a different time where we're recognizing things that perhaps weren't done in the best way, not the way we would do them today. But it doesn't change the time. It just changes how we would do it now, or how we perceive how we perceive it now, and that's fine. I'm all for looking at things that might need to go back and etc. But it doesn't change sort of the motivation, I think, behind the idea of exploration of that time.
Sure. There's quite a few comments that came through as you were talking. And I'll just hit on a few points that are relevant. So I was told that many black dog legends turned up during a period when smuggling was rife to scare people away from sites that smugglers were using for storing their goods.
I've heard that. In Cornwall especially, that one-eyed dog, I forget what they call it, so a padstow or something. I can't remember the name of the Cornish one. There's one or two of them, but one of them has a single eye, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think we actually had a historian here talking about that very story. Yeah, I mean, there's a case from like quite local to me in a place called Beckingham where it talks about some of the points that you mentioned about paganism, Christianity. So in this particular town, I think it was the mayor of the town. He was a staunch pagan, and he was trying to resist the kind of Christian wave that was coming over England at that time through the area of Mercia. And he had a black dog, and this Christian missionary came to his house and says, "You need to convert." And so he sent his dog out after him, and then the missionary actually touched the dog, and the dog kind of like turned over, had his belly scratched, and then the dog then came with the Christian and left. So it's kind of seen like a transitional period. It's seen as an allegory, really, from moving from one culture to another. And I can't wonder how many of that black dog stories have also replicate themselves across the country, where there's a shift in the kind of cultural zeitgeist.
I think that's a really good point, actually. You find that as well. We've done a lot of holy wells, and when I did theology in university. When I was in university, we had this book called Religion and the Decline of Magic, where it actually told you about how even as late as the 15th century, pagan shrines in Wales were being converted to Christian shrines in Wales for saints' names and other transubstantiated spiritual purposes. These venerated shrines in Wales have been there for a long time. And so it's interesting to see that actually the change in this country is a lot slower than we think it was.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I mentioned that the maypole here, there's actually one not far from me, if you're 6 miles away. And they'd still do a traditional dance every year when it comes to the summer solstice and throughout some other periods of the year. There's always Morris dancers who go there, and there's various troops of those now. So they are seeing that kind of a revival of kind of British traditionalism. And, it's quite cool to watch, actually, to watch what effectively is it a reimagining of, what they think it used to represent, or is it actually, does it have traditional roots? It's quite wonderful. So there's a question here from Robert Stenson. Andy, are you of Swedish or Norwegian origins?
No.
I don't know where that question came from, but hey, it's there.
It could be the accent. I think it's the face a little bit as well. I had a good friend, a long past researcher called Alan McKenna, and before he heard me speak, he didn't know. He thought I was Norwegian or something. I grew up in Wales. I've got a part of my family is Irish and the other part is English. I'm actually not ethnically Welsh at all. But I grew up in Cardiff, and I think the combination between all these influences, plus living around a lot, although, to be honest with you, I sounded like this even when I was growing up, I think it's combined to make whatever this accent is and the face, I can't do anything about it. But no, I'm not. Although my mother's maiden name is Orm, so I think that is originally a Norse name, meaning serpent or dragon or something. But it would probably be the English version of it, I imagine.
Okay. So Kieran Farrell asks, how large were the Owlmen or Mothmen, if you please? Do you know?
Owlmen's supposed to be about 5.5 feet tall, I think, 5.5 to 6 feet tall, by some witness descriptions. I think that the Eurasian eagle owl might reach about 4 feet. But I can only, imagine if one of those things got up and spread its wings and sort of slightly hovered, lifted itself off the ground about a half a foot. It might look a bit taller. I'm pretty convinced on that one. We're looking at an eagle owl. Not 100%, but I think a lot of the sightings really could. I mean, they always describe an owl. And it's a big owl, and it's not an owl that's native to this country. And I think, well, I think it could just be that, or a crane.
Yeah, certainly what you said was very relevant, where it might just be a migrating bird that used this place as a stop-off to continue on somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Dan here says he's been to a modern old church. The church tower is a lot lower than it appears to be in photos, which would exaggerate anything sitting upon it.
Yeah, it's actually not a big church, and the tower is, he's right, Dan, it's not a high tower. And that surprised me too. I was like, oh, it kind of looks cute. It sort of looked like a cute, lovely church. It was so well tended. I could have easily slept in that graveyard at night without a peep of a fear of anything. It seemed so lovely and safe and just nice. It seemed nice, it was like a lovely old grandma's garden. It was just beautiful. It really was.
No, that's lovely. So yeah, Kieran here says again, perspective is important in estimating the size of a creature or anything at distance, or particularly at an unusual place. I don't know what the question here is next. So we also, I guess, the sunken forest rolled next into the conversation. There's obviously still quite a few there. Dan H says he's been there and he's photographed it many years ago. You can see Ice Age drowned forest wherever the weather strips away sand. And I mentioned a comment also that there's a lot of sunken forests along the southern coast of England. And I watched the documentary, and it was by the BBC. I think it was one of their wildlife programs. And the way that it described what happened to England around 4,000 years ago, there's a large buildup of magma under Scotland. So what they did, that pushed up Scotland and lowered the bottom end of England. And that caused the sunken, the forests are above water to be underwater at that time.
Wow. That would really explain things, actually. I wonder if that would explain Doggerland also. That's about 6,000 years ago, isn't it? But I mean, still, I mean, it might have something to do with it. I mean, certainly, it's clear to us all that there were habitations that are now lost. We are an island, after all, so that's perhaps not out of the realm of possibility. But this one was fascinating to me. I always love these Atlantean legends. And to find out that there was one in Wales, which I never heard growing up until I started this show, was just awesome.
Yeah, the Isle of Man has similar stories. The island of Macmanaman Maclear from the Irish folklore, of course, again, very, very similar to Poseidon, very, very similar to Neptune. He had the ability to ride on water with his horses. He either had a 6-winged horse or he had horses that had 6 wings. I can't remember which way around it is, but again, they could fly and they could also glide across the water. And he had a number of men who were with him who weren't human, who basically were skilled in metallurgy. And they were called the Telkinae. And they basically created the Poseidon's his trident. So they are depicted in Greece along a lot of Poseidon's statues, but it's also very similar in Celtic legends, where in Macmanaman Maclear he had these Telkinae, who again, fish heads were often depicted with them, and they're all skilled metallurgists. And when I went to Ireland, I found a cave network there called the Telkinae Caves. And within them, apparently, was found figures of small dwarven people. So there may be a cross correlation between those things.
We're definitely going to have to talk about that later. We're going to go to Ireland for Series 3, so we'll have a chat about that afterwards. Strangely enough, thinking about the Celts, I mean, we're not indigenous to this island. We came from Europe. We would have been in touch with Greek culture, which was dominant in that past time. And I think, again, after that, Roman culture, these legends, these influences, they're all passed down. I mean, there's a few books that actually show transliteration of some of the different gods and goddesses' names are pretty much the same personage if you go back far enough. You know, with these empire builders, at least they've inherited some sort of form of that. And I think, essentially, the Irish could have picked up that influence from the Greeks or wherever they got it from as well, and so on and so forth. We're a closer people than we imagined, even in the past.
Yeah, for sure. You've got the Batarang dance. It's very similar to the Muma dance, of course, between Irish and what effectively is like Morocco. They have a very similar style of dance, which clearly shows the trade route along the southern Mediterranean coasts, going up towards England, the tin mines, etc., were heavily connected at very, very large, going back to the Roman times, if not before. So, incidentally, Dan H says here, Broth is where anything on that section of coast tends to wash up. If they are here and see seagulls, interested in something out of the shore. Not quite sure what I missed there. Continue to grow in your beard, Robert says here. It will give you pause for reflection on thought.
My beard.
Your beard growing.
Actually, it doesn't actually grow a lot. My body hates hair. I don't have any head hair. And I didn't have any facial hair until I was 27, I think.
Wow.
And I'm a year away from 50 now. So, my body just hates hair. This is the best I've ever been able to get, actually. It's the most I can grow it. Trivia fact.
What they were saying is you start to lose your hair up here, it starts to go here.
Well, yeah, maybe that was it. And now it's gone grey, so it's just kind of like, oh gosh, finally it's here, and yeah, there you go. Such is life.
I'm just looking for any more questions here. Thank you, Andy. Can you please explain the picture above your head?
Oh, this picture actually belonged to my wife, and it's the first ever painting she bought before she moved to England, and at the market. And she didn't know the painter; she just saw it, and there's 3 rocks suspended. I think they have some roots coming out of them above an ocean where they're reflected. I don't have a clue what it means. Been asked before. I like it. It's nice. I mean, we've been married 15 years, and it's been with us the whole time. But it's if it has some strange hidden esoteric meaning, I'm not aware of it.
So Mark Wallace makes an interesting statement here, which says, I have checked out the Brompton Mausoleum, and apparently the key isn't lost. The door was locked from the inside, and the builders left through an alternative entrance.
I don't know how they would have left. There's there's two large doors that they look like they're iron doors, completely covered in hieroglyphics. And the one at the back, I think, is the one that has the keyhole. I've seen the keyhole, and it's, according to them, and we did book in the filming with the curator of the cemetery. According to them, it was lost. It does not exist. But if it's inside, if it's inside the mausoleum and we can't get in, it's still lost.
It says, yeah, we haven't got.
But how did they get out? Unless they didn't get out, unless they locked themselves in and joined Hannah in her journey through time, But her three daughters are also buried in there, so at some point it was still open, long enough for them to die and join her there.
Okay, it sounds there's so many. Thank you very much, and much appreciated for a great talk and a great conversation. It certainly is. I mean, you've certainly tickled my mind across so many different topics, and it's actually good to hear a kind of plethora of different accounts, because sometimes sticking at one topic and you want to go, I want to go here, here, and here. So it's actually been wonderful to have that as a conversation here tonight. So I think we shall draw our evening to a close. Thank you very much for joining us here today, everyone. It has been absolutely a wonderful conversation here with our guest, Andy McGrath. Is it possible you could leave your social media messages, and where people can find you and how people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, sure. So you can, if you want to find me, Facebook. I think it's Facebook/Beasts of, I believe. Oh, but the Facebook page is Beastly Theories. I'll also their books and the TV show and everything else. But if you want to just get in touch with me, it's just Andy McGrath on Facebook. You'll see my face. My picture will be there. You're welcome to message me to talk to me. You can also email me at AndyRonMcGrath, AndyRonMcGrath @gmail.com, and I'm happy to chat. I might not get back straight away because I get busy, but I will definitely respond to you.
Caroline, over to you. Any last moments? Any last thoughts?
Yeah. So you've all asked for it. Next week, we've got UFOs, and it's Ash Ellis, and he's going to be talking about UFO sightings between 2020 and 2024. He actually has the data, the largest data collected on UFOs in the UK, and I have pinned him down. So look forward to that one next week. We've got a massive lineup coming up. Next week after that is Rob himself, Rob Ganty, talking about my favourite hauntings, subject matter expert for Rob as well, I believe, Ghosts of Goblin Hill. And then following that, the week after, we've got Eamon Van Harris. I just keep getting him for you. I just don't know how we're getting them on every week. Very lucky. The incredible names that we've got coming in. I'm so grateful. So Andy, again, thank you so much on behalf of ASSAP. You are incredible. I know that we've literally made you work so hard. But if you'd like to come back, we are booking for July and into August now. So by all means, if you want to do a tour, we won't.
Maybe I could do.